Tres, dos, uno, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from three Puerto Rican friends getting together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. Today, we continue our Fett Fridays with Chapter 3 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Streets of Mos Espa. I almost said the Sands of Mos Eisley for some reason. There's a lot of, all the titles are a little tricky now. As you can see, Nani's not joining us today. She's on her wedding anniversary, having, some fun. So she's not podcasting today, but we have the
Good on
wonderful
her.
Laura Kelly joining us from Force Toast. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
for being.
It's been a roller coaster with the Book of Boba Fett. I feel we're only 3 chapters in, but I feel that the discourse and the analysis have been like much more rigorous. I feel with this episode, with this series, than there was with the Mandalorian to a degree. Maybe because it's a legacy character, maybe it's because it's the second live action show that Lucasfilm is producing. But I think that there's a lot of expectations and that the fans have. And with episode 2, I think a lot of those expectations were met, and there was a lot of praise, and rightfully so, for representation with the Tusken Raiders. But chapter 3, if anyone has been on the Twitterverse, has been a spicy episode to say the least, and a shorter one, but a lot to discuss though. So why don't we just get started on that? Laura, you're our guest, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been thinking about the Book of Boba Fett so far and your initial reaction to chapter 3?
Well, you mentioned expectations, and I think that's playing a huge role in this. And one thing that I kind of didn't think about until just recently was that with the Mandalorian, other than like the time period, we knew that, but we really weren't familiar with what we were getting into with that. And so every week was kind of a surprise. We were all kind of in it together. But I think with Boba Fett, there are so many expectations for what people know or think they know of this character, what they got out of Legends, and how that compares to what we're getting now. And I don't want to say Lucasfilm like set themselves up to fail, but I think that I wouldn't have thought that I guess I probably wouldn't have given that much thought to this. I would have thought, like fan favorite character, Boba Fett, people have been asking for this forever. Let's do it. And I'm starting to kind of wonder if they really gave it that thought to be like, oh no, there's expectations here. This may or may not be received as well as we think that it will. Because I mean, even like something like the Bad Batch, I don't feel like has been as heavily criticized as this show. And it's kind of unfair because I'm really enjoying the story so far. There are episodes that haven't been my favorite, but when you look at like television series in general and you look at like their first season, sometimes the first season doesn't knock it out of the park, and that's really understandable. You think about a show like Parks and Rec where like nobody wants to ever watch the first season of that show. Like we're just laying the groundwork here in this season. Like we need to get through the groundwork before we can get to some of the good stuff, but we're also getting really good stuff out of these first 3 episodes. So that's kind of where I am at so far. I think people are being a little bit too harsh. Overall, I think the show has been really great so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Do we know if Book of Boba Fett is going to be just a limited series or if it's going to have multiple seasons?
It wasn't clear when it was announced, because I don't think I've seen the word limited series announced anywhere. Like with Obi-Wan, I'm pretty sure they have said like that is going to be a limited series. It's going to be like 4, 6 episodes, whatever. And limited series can be picked up for second seasons, but I think the expectation with this is that it's going to do well enough that it will get a season 2. And I'm sure it will, but I think that that's basically what they were setting themselves up for from the get-go.
Yeah. Mo, I know last week when we were discussing chapter 2 with Arzu, which was a fantastic conversation, everybody. If you haven't checked it out, make sure to check it out. Wonderful, but I'm biased, obviously. So we were very positive about that, especially with the flashback sequences. A little underwhelmed with the present timeline, but with the flashback seasons with the Tusken Raiders, there was a tonal shift a little bit with this episode between flashbacks and present time. Did you have a reaction to that, Mo? And what were your overall thoughts about the episode?
Well, it's interesting because the Bacta has been like that water theme that has been like since the beginning. Like we're in Tatooine, there's no moisture, there's no water. So the Bacta has always been that regenerative. But in this episode, it's almost like feel like they're giving it like the end, Black
Mhm.
Carisian,
However you say chrysanthemum, I think it was.
something, yeah. Like I feel like, and then the fact that takes Boba out, but then right after that fighting sequence, the first thing Boba does is like use my Bacta to save
Mhm.
the
Gamorrean
one
guard.
of one of the guards. So I feel like that could be the close. We did see the ending of. It was an unfortunate ending to how the Tuscan tribes were treated. I thought where they were going was that maybe Boba was going to be able to, bridge the gap between the Tuscan Raiders and the Tatooine, and
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
that was going to be like what will set apart like Boba Fett's dynasty, or
Mhm,
I
mhm.
thought that was where they were laying the groundwork, and then to just kill them to have a backstory
Right.
felt kind of cheap in some ways. But again, just expectations on what one is like looking for and
Mhm, mhm.
whatnot. And then it almost feels like this episode to me just felt like very like I felt like I was playing like an RPG, good character.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah. Especially that
I
ending, right, with the bike chase.
yeah, like the first this person comes in, oh, I have a quest, I will double my tribute. I mean, and
Right.
then
I was
they
worried that
didn't
this is
ask
gonna
like,
become like a Mandalorian thing where it's just like the quid pro quo thing. It's just like you do this for me, I'll do that for you. And I was like, it didn't exactly go that way, but I was a little concerned. And so I'm appreciative
I
that it
liked
didn't
it.
end
I
that way.
liked it in the sense that it gave like it's given like Boba's comfortable doing this kind
Mhm,
of
mhm.
like things. Like it's the transition of like
Yeah,
going
that's what
from
he's used to
bounty
doing.
hunter to yeah. But then not even asking like, oh yeah, double tribute, like of what? Double of one could be two. Like
True.
it's
Right,
not
right,
like
right.
it's the message, it's the like I love how that naive side of like we're learning this process. So I appreciate that.
Hmm.
Uh but then it turns like it's almost like, oh, I saved here's your water. Oh, I can take care of them, or choose the option of saving the kids, and they'll join
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
gang. And it was like a very joyful ride. I felt like I was
Hmm.
just playing like a game of Boba, and
Hmm.
maybe that's the story. That's the book you're reading, like this story of Boba Fett. That's about like just been through a tough life. Like let's
Right. It's an ebook with some side quest video game parts to it.
yeah. Uh, love that they brought up a Rancor and
Mhm.
finally treating like a pet. I was like,
Right.
oh, that's see, like finally, like we're bridging the gap of like nature and like humans and
Yeah.
space people. So, but then like certain things just felt like underwhelming on this episode. I feel like it might be the weakest, if
Mhm.
if any. But I'm excited to see like where it's heading, and the fact that the Pikes are being like so important. It's sort of like bringing back of like, oh, are we gonna start like bridging like the Pikes from whatever's happening with Omega and the Bad
Mhm.
Batch,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
whatever was happening with the Martez sister. Like is all of this gonna be interconnected and come into effect in a bigger
Mhm.
place? So all those things are like starting to pop by. So all in all, interesting, but not my favorite episode.
Yeah, I had that same visceral reaction because I woke up this morning. First thing I did, it's one of the perks, I guess, from working from home. I can kind of start the day a little later and just watch the episode. And I finished the episode. And it was kind of an underwhelmed feeling because by the end of it, I'm like, oh, so the show hasn't really started, and everything that we've been looking at so far is kind of over. Even though, yes, we know that the flashback scenes are going to continue, but something kind of didn't sit right with me by the end of the episode. Not to say that it was bad. I just felt that the tapestry that was woven right in chapter 2 was so rich that all of a sudden chapter 3 kind of felt like setup. Lots of setup, lots of cameos, on waiting for the next thing. And if this were, I don't know, like a 10 episode, 12 episode season, sure, let's do that. But when it's 6 episodes, it's kind of like, okay, why is it, I mean, 7 episodes, why aren't we hitting the ground running? So not to say that we can't take our time to be, take it slow and like have the characters develop, but there was something weird with the episode that just didn't jive for me. Still fun, right? It's still a compliment sandwich. There's still a lot of cool things about it. Black Cranston's fight was kind of cool, even though the choreography was kind of weird. It's like waiting for each one to attack. So in that sense, it's like, okay.
It's an RPG.
Exactly. It's just like, okay, fine. The bike race, when I saw it the first time, I thought it was cool. But then the second time I was like, well, these bikes aren't going that fast. I think I can jog. I can jog past them pretty quick. And obviously with the Back to the Future reference, right? I'm like all the shit falling on the car instead of this time it's Melurons, which cool. I didn't catch it the first time, but the second time I'm like, whoa, is this the first time we've seen Melurons in live action? Maybe
I thought
not.
that same thing. I had the same, like, I didn't catch it the first time. The second time I was like, oh my God, Melurons from the animation. That's so awesome.
So I was reading Wikipedia and they were mentioned in The Mandalorian, but I don't think we saw them. So this might actually be the first live action appearance. So that's a good one to keep in the memory banks for trivia, if it ever comes back. We'll see if Star Wars trivia comes back to Chicago. But I don't know. The whole Tusken thing was especially weird to me, not because of what happened necessarily, because we kind of knew that was what they were setting up to some extent, because it's the trope, right? The tribe, you lose your tribe and then you have to find meaning without it. But after setting up such big character development, cultural development for the Tuskens to humanize them and give them their ownership of their land and ancestral claim and a lot of these personalities that they have been robbed of in the original trilogy, to all of a sudden just be like, yeah, they're dead now. Don't worry about it. All those 30 minutes you spent with them last episode, we're going to kill them in 5 minutes.
Well, do you really think they're gone now?
I think, because we saw the tribal leader dead, so he's gone. He's dead, burnt to a crisp. He's like Tan Mom right now, not coming back. But I do think that badass Tusken lady and Tusken kid might be coming back. I think some of the tribe is still around. So I do think that there's potential for that mistake of this episode to be redeemed. And I say mistake because I don't think the problem of it is, setting this up for further episodes, is how it was handled. It's kind of like flippant. It's like, oh yeah, well, now they're dead. Deal with it and keep going. I felt it needed to be kind of, a little more reverential, a little more respectful, a little more mournful. And I don't think we got that. Did you have any reaction to that, Laura?
Well, I mean, I'm watching the scenes with the Tusken camp burning. I mean, the first time I watched it, I was just like, okay, well, I see 3 dead banthas. I don't see any dead Tuskens. It took like a second watch for me to be like, okay, I think I see 3 dead Tuskens. Like he was talking about how they've got like more numbers than the Nikto biker gang. Yeah. I'm just like, well, there clearly are more of them out there somewhere. Some of them must have escaped, or maybe they got taken prisoner or something, and maybe that's going to be part of the next flashback in the next episode where he has to like seek them out and rescue them. I don't know. I hope but so. Yeah. I'm not convinced that they're all gone. And I'm not convinced that we're not, that we're done with the Tusken storyline at this point. But I do agree that it was a really strange transition to go from what we got last week that was so celebratory of like the equivalent of indigenous culture in Star Wars, to go from that to what we got in this episode. I mean, the flashback sequence in this episode was 6 minutes long. It was such a small part of it, and that was sort of jarring to have the 2 episodes be that different.
Because one of the things that I was thinking too is that when Boba's surveying the remnants of the tribe and all the tents and everything, at the end, obviously we see the logo of the Nikto gang. In the back of my mind, I'm like, no, I don't buy this. This is bullshit. We've seen what Boba can do with his Tusken training to that gang at Tachi Station. He just laid waste to them. He was just the one against the whole gang. You're telling me that then those guys that got their ass handed to them by Tusken trained Boba are gonna lay waste to a whole tribe of super badass warriors? it's odd. So maybe it's a red herring that it was them. Maybe if, I don't know. This is the Mephisto now, right? Maybe it was Crimson Dawn that did it. I don't know. It was just odd, and especially like in the for the framing of it. Like this, we haven't set up the Nikto gang to be particularly threatening, at least to anyone who's competent in, fighting. And the Tusken Raiders are more than competent. Mo, what did you think about what happened with the Tusken Raiders?
Oh, I mean,
is that to Mo or to me?
Mo. Sorry.
No, I agree with, like, the first time I saw it, I was like, well, if this is just the end of the flashbacks, like, I'll be really disappointed.
Yeah,
because it's just a trope. It's just, all of this, like, oh,
right,
everything in this representation matters, and then, like, but it was just to use you, like, you're dead now. So I hope that's not the case. I hope it's like kind of like what Laura was saying, like, maybe just 3 are dead and everybody else just escaped, and hopefully that will lead to the next part of it. It did felt kind of like there is still like a very open story. Like, there's still the plot line of, like, the Pikes, is still the plot line of the Raider. So it will be interesting to see what happens. I hope it's not the end of the Tusken Raider. So I'll be disappointed. I did feel like when it happened, I was like, oh no, Anakin, what you do again? But
exactly.
He's back.
Yeah, and it's like
I had flashbacks of, like, what we've seen this before.
I thought you were redeemed at this point. But to that point, I think it's disappointing to see that, because Hollywood does that all the time, and it just brings to mind when I was watching the Suicide Squad, and we discussed it when we were reviewing that film, the James Gunn one, not the David Ayer one. That whole scene when Peacemaker and Idris Elba, I forgot his character's name, Idris Elba, are just laying waste to, like, the whole field of freedom fighters. This is like South American, Latin American people fighting for their freedom, and it's played for gags, it's played for jokes, and, like, underrepresented groups are just used for gags or for tools for storytelling. So I think it's disappointing to see, like, Lucasfilm do that after setting them up to be, like, cultural heroes in this show. And I wonder if that's a systemic thing of just having one person write the show, because to an extent we saw that with Mandalorian season 2, whereas Favreau, for the most part, writing everything. And not to say that he's a bad writer, he's a great writer, but it's just him. So I don't know, Laura, do you think that there is, like, some inherent problem with just having one person be writing this whole show? Would this benefit from being like the Bad Batch or Rebels or Clone Wars, where there's a round table basically of writers that are, there's a lead writer for certain episodes, but there's more representation, like whose ideas and inputs are being told into the story. Here it's just Favreau and sometimes Filoni. Is that a systemic problem that we're seeing with live action right now? Too few creators?
I think it is, because I think that, when I think about Star Wars animation, you think about how, like, Dave Filoni is, like, the sort of supervising director of all of it, and he's sort of jumping and writing episodes here and there. I think that setup works really well. Now, I don't know, enough about television production to know if that translates to live action, that sort of format, but it's kind of surprising to me that we're not seeing, like, at least a couple of different writers, like, being credited in these episodes, or, like, contributing writers, like, working on these scripts with Favreau. Like, the fact that it's just all on him, I wonder if that's maybe, like, they're just trying to keep the story consistent. You've got Filoni probably working on Ahsoka right now. You've got Jon Favreau probably also working on Mandalorian season 3, and, like, people are probably just being pulled in a lot of directions. But I am surprised that we're not seeing other people contributing to the writing staff in particular on this show. I am relieved to see that we're seeing some, we at least got a different director last season or last episode. It makes me hopeful that we'll get more, other directors contributing to this first season, and that it's not just going to be, every other episode is Robert Rodriguez, which is fine. But I just think that, I really like the sort of, diverse group of directors we had with The Mandalorian, and the fact that they then brought them all back, and you can kind of, like, each episode sort of has like a different vibe, and that's kind of fun, even though it's like it's a very different show, you know, in terms of its format, you know, where we've got this sort of like monster of the week in the Mandalorian, and we're not really having that in this show. But I just think that, you know, having a little bit more, I don't know, variety on the writing staff would be a welcomed change, maybe with this show.
Yeah, it's odd because this show is doing something that I thought would be more appropriate in The Mandalorian, which is staying on Tatooine. Like I thought that Boba would be like, I don't know, hunting down crime syndicates left and right on Slave One. And all of a sudden, like to just have it to show. I mean, we still have the latter half of the show to see what happens, but in so far to have him stay in Tatooine, it's kind of like counterintuitive, at least to me, as you know, someone who's just looking at from the outside and thinking about who Boba Fett is, which I think is a good decision, honestly, for the character. It's just kind of odd to see like in the framing of the show. But speaking of Robert Rodriguez and his directing, today we saw some really cool things though coming from him, and it's being blessed with the presence of Danny Trejo as the Rancor. What would you call it? The Rancor keeper, which I don't know why I didn't expect it. I should have. Danny Trejo's in every Robert Rodriguez project, but it was odd. It was so weird because I felt that he didn't fit in, but he did at the same time. And for me, my favorite scene of this episode so far, well, not so far, the episode's done. My favorite scene of this episode was that Rancor scene in particular. I think that
Agreed.
Danny Trejo and Thames, you know, back and forth about what the personality of the Rancor is very telling about the story that they're trying to tell with this show. But it's also, you know, I think this show thrives when they do those personal moments. Now, Mo, I know you're very particular about how beasts and animals are represented in Star Wars and other media. So how did you react when you saw that the compassion that they were treating the Rancor, right? Because Rancors usually are, you know, this beast of burden or this gladiatorial beast that's just there to kill everybody, until all of a sudden, like, take a step back, kind of like Bad Batch, and treat it like Moochie and be like, oh no, these are sweet animals. How did that make you feel?
Well, I think that I would agree. It's the best scene in the whole episode. It's just beautiful how they even describe like, oh, like it's depressed, has depression. Like there's like this whole like idea of like it goes back to why in Return of the Jedi the keeper cried when the Rancor was killed.
Right.
Like when we first saw it, you know, why would somebody cry over that monster? But it's not a monster. Now we know it's imbuing that compassion of like, just because it doesn't look like us, it's because it looks like a monster, it looks different, doesn't mean it has the same capacity of understanding, of empathy, of growing up. And that whole idea of like treating it like a bird, like it imprints on a whatever looks first, kind of like that mom and motherly connection that creates, like it's very interesting. And I was like, I'm so glad it brought that. And I just love like when the robot came, I was like, oh, somebody's here. It's like, no,
I'm busy.
Yeah. Like, I'm busy.
I'm petting my cat. Go away.
Anything else, but I'm busy. So I did. The only thing I'm hoping is to see Boba give it a name.
For a second, I thought it was Moochie, and I'm like, oh, Moochie's back, and all grown up. But then I was like, okay, not everyone has to be something we've seen before. There are more than two Rancors. So it can be.
I'm glad that they clarified right off the bat, though, so people weren't spending the next week being like, "Is it Moochie? Is it not Moochie? I don't know. Like, do we need to connect everything back? Like, no, we don't. We really don't. It's okay to have another baby Rancor."
Right. And I thought it was so poignant, though, especially with how Boba reacted to it. Instead of being like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna train this to be, you know, like my beast of, you know, burden to like kill my enemies, to be part of my menagerie," his first instinct's just like, I want to write it, you know, I want to set it free, I want to take it outside. You know, but even more than that, what was funny is Boba saying like, I've written creatures 10 times this size. And in the back of my mind, I was like, banthas aren't bigger than Rancors, but then I was like, holy crap, this is they went there. This is a callback to the holiday special. This is Boba Fett riding that dinosaur in the animated section. So my question is now,
Officially
is
canon
that
now?
yeah, exactly, it's canon. So does that mean the rest of the holiday special is canon? I don't know.
God,
We'll
I
have to
hope
see.
not.
It feels like they are slowly kind of canonizing at least bits and pieces of that. But what did you think about the whole Rancor thing, Laura?
I love Rancors. I'm on the record of loving Rancors because I love any animal with an underbite. Anything with an underbite is going to always remind me of English bulldogs, which are just one of my favorite things in existence. And so I've always gotten a lot of joy out of the Rancors, and especially in like what we saw with the sort of cuter interpretation that we got in the Bad Batch was really fun. So I love that we're harkening back to that a little bit, and I like that we've got this like Rancor keeper that clearly cares a lot for this animal. We know that I don't know, I feel a little bit more like comfort in knowing that this animal will be taken care of and that Boba Fett really likes him. He kept calling it an it. I'm like, can we establish what exactly it is? I'm also looking forward to it getting a name. But yeah, this scene where the droid is like kind of pops his head out from the side just cracked me up, and he's like, go away, I'm busy petting my dog.
Right.
And I totally forgot about how Boba like rode whatever giant beast it was in the holiday special. When he said that line in this show, I was just like, bro, what
it took
big
a while.
animal,
like,
what are you riding out there? Like what have you been up to? Are we gonna get that in the flashback scenes at any point? Because I would like to see that
live action holiday special, animated holiday special recreations. That'd be cool. I don't know if some people are ready for that one.
No,
but it would definitely be cool.
The world may not be ready for that one. The Star Wars fandom certainly not.
But they have to do it in the same style as the holiday special though, with like all the 70s strippy colors as a background and the Boba Fett, the armor colored the same way. They can't make it gritty like
you got to recast the Arthur. You got a lot of boxes you got to check there.
Taika Waititi would be the perfect person to like make that live action thing happen. He has like that weird sensibility, so let's make it happen. But speaking of the Rancor, we can't speak about them about the Rancor. We don't know. Yeah, let's say them without talking about the twins who gifted the Rancor to Boba Fett, and they had an interesting appearance because they were just there to just say bye Felicia, basically. Showed up in one episode to lay claim to Tatooine, and then it's just like, kidding, girl, I'm out. So the Hutts were definitely a red herring, which was a little frustrating, especially for how short the series is. So to kind of have them show up as a foil to Boba Fett and then peace out in the second episode was kind of dissatisfying, I feel. Laura, how did you feel about how the Hutts were treated and how their impact in the story and what we see moving forward with the Pikes?
I think with the Hutts, it's sort of been there, done that for me. So I kind of don't mind that they sort of made a quick entrance and exit in this show. I like that they're the ones who are sort of setting up this, they kind of hinted at it. They're like, there's another crime syndicate that's interested in taking over this worthless rock. So we out. And my first thought was like, oh my God, like, are we going to get maybe like Crimson Dawn, or are they going to bring in like Black Sun? Are we going to get like, is this show going to eventually morph into like a sort of war of the syndicates? Because that would be really fun to watch, especially in this time period where we're not super familiar with where all the syndicates are in this time. So that was what my first thought was. But I think, I think this is probably good. We've got the twins have, come in, said their piece, and are on their way. And I think that we're hopefully going to start maybe getting into more of what exactly is happening with the Pikes and sort of setting them up more to be our more of our villains, perhaps. I'm starting to wonder now that I'm saying it, if like maybe Boba's going to end up teaming up with them. He has a habit now of like confronting people and then all of a sudden inviting them to be part of his squad, which I kind of like, but I don't see that happening with the Pikes. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting choice to have there's still a long way to go, so the Pikes might still be a red herring and maybe someone else is pulling the strings. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, everyone talks about Crimson Dawn first, But my thought is always like Black Sun, because I'm like, that's the syndicate we've seen the least of so far. I mean, yeah, they just canonized Prince Caesar, and like we know that they've been around the Clone Wars and stuff, but we haven't really seen that much of Black Sun. So it would be kind of cool for like all the Shadows of the Empire fans to be like, okay, here we go. We're gonna give them a storyline, and this is it. Which makes sense with Boba Fett, especially with the Shadows of the Empire story, to have him have the Black Sun as a foil. But speaking of enemies or frenemies in this case, right? That Boba has them turn into allies. Today we saw the biker gang or the Vespa gang. I don't know what everyone's calling them. The
Back
sharpest
to the
kids,
Future 2 gang.
the Back to the Future 2 gang. The sharpest. I mean, these kids are dressing sharper than anyone in Canto Bight. Everyone's looking good. So you see these street urchins, these youths, stealing water from the from what's the sheriff of Nottingham's name? I forgot.
Lortha.
Yeah. And then Boba being like, no, these are scrappy young lads like I am, and this guy should just lower the price of the water. I saw some discourse online about that not being part of Star Wars because it's too bright and shiny, too much chrome, which begs me to wonder, like, did these people never watch Attack of the Clones? Did they not see Dexter's Diner? Did they not see any Naboo Starfighter? We've had chrome before. We've had weird retro 50s things. But Mo, why don't we
look at
start with you
American
now?
Graffiti just by itself,
Right,
too.
right. George Lucas loves all that hot rod stuff, so I thought it was funny to like match up swoop bikes with Vespas and shoppers, and that's what you get, and then you turn it into Star Wars. But Mo, what? Let's go with you first. What was your thought about that whole sequence / storyline with the Back to the Future kids? What did you think? And ultimately, what did you think of how the story ended? Right, with their little chase sequence there at the end. Super slow, slower than Last Jedi, probably.
But it's interesting because we'll get to why I think it was good that it was slow. But all for whoever, go for it. If they want to chrome and be like that, awesome.
Go for it.
And then like I love like they're proud about it. Like you don't have to, no shame. Like don't just. I have my eye. I invested a lot of this in this.
It reminded me of the I forgot the name of the kids in Mad Max Fury Road. I just put the chrome and said, "Witness me." That's all that they needed to do to kind of be like the apocalyptic chrome gang.
Yeah, but this like that they were like everybody was like dressed nice. Everybody had their own style. Like they were impeccable on their. I mean, right. I'm not sure how they keep all the sand away during the day, but.
Yeah, those outfits. I mean, I don't mean to judge how anyone dresses, but like if I'm in Tatooine, those guys were wearing coats. I was like, Jesus, that looks like coats for Hoth. But I wasn't sure like their fashion choices at some points because I don't know. It seemed like those guys were a little too hot in some of their outfits.
Commitment. That's called commitment, baby.
That's
commitment.
True. That's true. It's better to die looking good than to not, I guess. Laura, how did you feel about the Back to the Future gang?
Oh, I thought they were fun. That was my immediate thought was like, oh, this looks like Biff's gang in Back to the Future. So that's just what I'm going to keep calling them, or Back to the Future 2. So I enjoyed it. I thought that this was also really exciting to finally get to see this character we saw in the trailer. Yes. Sophie Thatcher, was that maybe her last name? And I'm not familiar with her work or what else she's been in, but I just remember seeing that character in the trailer and being like, all right, like some Jyn Erso vibes, like that's kind of cool. And so I like that we finally got introduced to her. I kind of hope that we keep these characters around because I think they're adding an interesting youthful dynamic to the show. So I hope they stick around, and I hope their Vespas stick around too, because I thought they were fun. Certainly didn't put the speed in speeders because it did feel like a very slow chase scene. I saw Molly Damon today refer to it as like playing Mario Kart, which I was like, yes, that is That is 100% on point, I think. But even
Maybe
Mario Kart
and
is
Super
faster than
Nintendo.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they're fun. I like their fun, bright look. My main complaint when I first heard about the show was like, God damn, are we going to be on Tatooine for this entire show? So I like that we're getting a little bit of color added to it. It just makes, in general, makes the landscape a lot, more easy on the eyes, I think. Although I will say I stand corrected, because a lot of these like really beautiful sweeping shots we've got in this show have been much prettier than I ever would have anticipated. They've done a lot with Tatooine on this show, and I appreciate that.
That's true. Tatooine has definitely been way more colorful in this show than it ever has been, and I really appreciate it because it sets it apart and it doesn't feel as drab as we're kind of used to seeing it, for sure. And like, to all the haters, I say, like, is that everything supposed to look the same in Star Wars? There's only like one aesthetic. Which is, I was really a big fan of Canto Bite to begin with. And like, okay, I mean, yeah, everyone else lives in misery and everyone's stuff, is oxidized and falling apart. But there must be people that buy things from Amazon Prime and they have it new. It's like some people must take care of their things. It's kind of good to see that even in Mos Espa, people, take care of their bikes and take it and wash it on Sundays. So kudos to them. Mo, I think you had like further thoughts though about the slowness of the chase.
Well, I mean, they're considerate. Like, these people live there. Like, they know their neighbors. Like, the mayordomo can't be destroying the whole thing. If not, it's not gonna be able to help the mayor's cause. And then you have this Back to the Future kids. Like, they're breaking their probably aunt's water tank. Like, they're careful. So props to them to keep it on a slow chase and to achieve their.
So you're saying that this was purposefully slow?
Purposely slow. They were doing a safe car chase. So props to them.
More considerate.
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate. I can see that. I could vibe it if that's the canon reason. I'm like, okay, these kids are cool. They get the job done and they follow the rules.
Exactly. It's the Boba style.
It's the not the Boba style. I mean, now.
That's what Boba has been. It's like the lawful good. Like, I'm gonna help everybody and everything's gonna be fine, and it's spreading around. So good on them.
Yeah. But speaking of Boba, for some reason that made me think of this other known character in the show, Fennec Shand. And I mean, I love Fennec Shand ever since we saw her in The Mandalorian. I loved her in The Bad Batch. I don't know if I'm digging her so much in the Book of Boba Fett, not because of her, but because of the role that she has been given so far. I feel like I'm waiting each episode to like see her kind of be co-equals with Boba Fett and kind of take the reins and kind of be, hey, Boba, that's not your throne, that's mine. Because she feels like she's more suited to be the crime boss or crime lord more so than Boba Fett. So I'm always disappointed with the representation, right, that Fennec has been having so far in the show. So I don't know if anyone shares those thoughts. What are your thoughts, Laura, on Fennec so far in the Book of Boba Fett?
I mean, I think I'm mostly in agreement with you. I wish she had more to do in this show. I do think that she's bringing a sort of fun, dry humor to the series so far, and I do appreciate that. I think that Boba Fett brings that too. I mean, we get these little moments of humor from him, but we're getting a lot of it, I think, from her when she does speak, which she doesn't talk a lot and she's not doing a lot yet. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that respect, because we got, great action sequences with her in The Mandalorian and in The Bad Batch. And I'm just left wanting a little bit with Fennec in this. I'm still so glad that she's there. And I think she's just playing a smaller role than I would have liked, or than I would have even anticipated for somebody who I think was billed as like being a lead character in this show.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're just like holding Fennec after like the whole like Bacta sequences end, or if it's a lack on the writing department, because that could also be. But I do agree with like Laura, like the fact that Fennec is there almost makes the duo complete. At least the whole scene of like, after their fight and like, oh, Boba, we have to do something, and Fennec's like, eat. Like, Like it's
Mhm.
there's wisdom in there. Like just wait, patience. Like so we're also seeing like that power behind the throne dynamic play out a little bit. So I hope they
Mhm.
start stretching that out and like seeing like yeah no we'll love like I would love to see more fight sequence, but also would love to see like more of that like ruling and power dynamic
Mhm.
of like the whole they are becoming a crime syndicate and crime lord if that's what they're aiming at. So who knows, maybe that's what I want to see, like that dynamic start floating around.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Fennec seems so much more invested in the what the throne to become the daimyo, right? Of Mos Espa, that it kind of feels like Boba Fett's doing it because he thinks that's what he should be doing, and it feels like Fennec kind of wants that more than him. So in a sense, I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm expecting, hoping, or wishing for there to be like a role reversal at some point in the show where Boba realizes that, hey, this is, maybe I should just retire and be a house husband and just just sit back
Like, oh,
on the on
I got the
yeah
kids.
yeah, sit back at the palace and Fennec's palace and just run the Roomba while cooking, a feast for Fennec and the other crime bosses while Fennec takes care of business and helps her out
I
on a
would
couple
watch
of
that
missions.
show.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think that's would be much better, and it would be so much better because it would piss off so many of the man babies that complain about Boba Fett so much that just for that it would be worth it. And
Amen.
but I think, I mean, compliment sandwich, right? We started with the good stuff, discussed a little bit of the controversy with the Tusken Raiders. So let's get a little bit into speculation. Every time I speculate, it's always wrong, but it's still fun to do it. And like now you're here, Laura, let's listen to some different perspectives. So another episode in, we get a little bit more information. We saw a little red herrings with some of the things that were going on. Now the Pikes apparently so far are the main villain that Boba has to contend with. What do we think is going to happen as the season develops? Do you have any theories?
Well, I've been right once, kind of, so far when we reviewed episode 2 over on Geek Buddies on Roka's channel.
Mhm.
My guess was that we were probably going to be wrapping up the flashbacks a little bit. Somebody in the chat had like complained. They're like, "I'm sick of these flashbacks," and I'm like, "I'm not."
They're the
That's a
best
weird
part.
thing to say. They
Yeah.
are. They are. They're so good, and what they're bringing to the story is so great. But I kind of got the sense from the last episode, because we ended there, I was like, "This is." I just think that we've sort of wrapped up this part of the story. We're probably going to be spending more time in the present. So at least I got one thing right so far. In terms of speculation, I'm wondering if we will see a pod race or the grand arena at any
Right.
point. We
Mm-hmm,
saw Jabba running things, and he was the sort of person overseeing the pod race at one point. I would love to go
mm-hmm.
back to that. I think it'd be really fun. That said, some of the action sequences we've seen so far in the show have really not lived up to what I think Star Wars really should be living up to. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of getting more into like, maybe we hold off on that until we get like a bigger
Mm-hmm.
budget in season 2 or something.
Yeah.
But I do think that is one of the things I sort of keep going back to, because I love all these little references that we're getting to all of the things that we know and love about Tatooine, especially even like, I mean, was her name Pelly, the Amy Sedaris character from The
Yeah.
Mandalorian? We saw her
That we
like
saw
scurry
today.
by.
Yeah.
Loved that. I loved that little cameo. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe we'll get some of her in this episode. That would be my guess. But in terms of speculation, I don't have a whole lot else to predict. I'm kind of enjoying just being along for the
Mm-hmm.
ride for the most part.
Yeah, the pod race thing I think is really cool, especially since we kind of did get a race today. So maybe it's just like, oh, that's the little race, but the big race is coming soon. Definitely with the fight scenes, I agree. We only got a half a second of Boba Fett flying. It was technically landing. So I'm like, okay, so why would we not see Boba Fett more active in terms of his fighting? So far, we've only, I mean, no offense to massive Boba Fett fans, but so far we've only seen him get his ass handed to him in Boba armor. He's only been like a badass when he's in Tusken garb. That's when he's a badass. When he's in Boba armor, ass handed to him. Which
That's infused.
Exactly. He needs to find balance, right, between his Tusken tribal self and the person he wants to be as a heir of Mandalorian heritage. Mo, what do you have any theories going forward for the Book of Boba Fett?
I want to actually just keep in Tatooine. I want to see, they already laid out all the other like gangs and like factions that were separated. So I want to see if Boba like has to get them together to work against the Pikes, like what dynamic is gonna happen. It's not bad to have a story that's like more localized. Like it doesn't have to be an implication to like, oh, this is gonna be directly related to everything that's gonna happen on the sequel trilogy. Like, it's a big universe, it's a big galaxy. Like there can be I'm hoping it stays like in that local arena and see like how that plays out. I do hope that I'm wishing that the Tuscans will still maybe come back a little bit. I'm with Laura. I love the flashbacks. I think they're better than the present moment in some ways.
For now, yes.
And then it brings so much like more to like what is Boba. So I want to see like that fusion between like, okay, there's what that journey ends up being and what next journey is going to be for Boba. So let's see. I'm excited for it. I want to just see like that Boba inviting everybody being friends, and so who knows, it works.
Yeah absolutely. Like I'm really hoping, like we discussed before, that the Tuskens are going to factor in somehow, especially like Badass Lady Tusken, which at this point I don't know why we're not naming some characters. Why does the Ant Doctor get a name? Why does Dr. Mandible get a name? And and Frog Lady and Frog Lady doesn't get a name. Why doesn't Badass Lady Tusken get a name? Like people deserve names, especially if like you're gonna feature them. Anyway, rant aside, I hope that she comes back with little kid Tusken, and they, that they're there and they're still going to contribute to Boba's story, so that we haven't closed the book on the Tuskens and be just like, well, genocide, that's their fate. First Anakin, now the useless Niktos. So hopefully like they come back and factor into Boba's story in the present. Like I want them to stop being in the past and be present, not just for the implications in the story, but also for what it means in terms of representation. It's like, yeah, like indigenous people are still part of the story. They're still part of the narrative. Even now, they're not in the past handing off knowledge to someone else, even though like Tem's indigenous. So it's not that, it's not that trope, but to have that cultural group be marginalized and have their story stay in the past doesn't sit well with me. So I hope that we, do that for both context, storytelling and representation. In terms of everything else that's going to happen, man, I don't know. I wanted Cat Bane for so long since the show was announced, because I'm like, that's my favorite bounty hunter. Like,
hell yeah.
Boba wasn't my cup of tea, and Django I never cared for at all. So Cat Bane was it for me. But at this point, 3 episodes in, I'm like, maybe that's too loaded right now. We need to kind of pump the brakes on cameos, perhaps, because that's, if I learned something from Mando season 2, you can have too much of a good thing, and too many cameos weighs down the storytelling a little bit, unless it definitely makes sense for the story. So I don't know. I'm a little disappointed with episode 3 so far, but still excited for what the future holds for the Book of Boba Fett. But I think with that, we conclude our review and reaction to the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 3, The Streets of Mos Espa. I almost messed it up. But before we go, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you? I know you're in a lot of places, so why don't you tell everybody where you can be found?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. If you want to come find me on Twitter, my handle is at @shutup_Laura, and that's where I've spent most of this past week and probably the week before screaming about the High Republic, because I'm loving what's going on in that storytelling initiative right now. John Roca and I host The Jedi Way on his YouTube channel, and this month I'm joining the Geek Buddies also on his channel to review and recap the Book of Boba Fett. And the podcast that I host with my friend Alice is called Force Toast, a Star Wars Happy Hour, which you can find that on all major podcast platforms.
Perfect. And we will obviously make sure to leave links in the description below. So for everyone that's been listening, make sure to check out Laura. Their content is amazing. But with that, we have been Triad of the Force. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search at Triad of the Force, and you can find us. We're on YouTube as well. And if you really like the channel and want to support us a little bit, we do have a TeePublic where you can find some designs that may or may not be cool. That's up for you to decide. Every design you buy, we get $2 out of it. So low profit margins, but moderately cool designs for you. But with that, thank you so much. We have been Triad of the Force, and may the Force be with you.